imported into America. That's what this means, Kartikeya. 25% plus an additional 25%. I don't think many expected that. But the fact of the matter here is that Donald Trump has been raving and ranting and going on a tirade about India buying oil from Russia, and that being a major deal breaker for him, a major irritant for the United States of America. And here too, the executive order that has been signed by Donald Trump mentions the fact that India directly or indirectly imports oil from Russia, which, let's face it, there is no secret about it. And as India has been telling the world, the US, in fact, encouraged India to start buying oil from Russia since the war began, to stabilize global oil prices. And now suddenly you have Donald Trump going completely against it, over and above everything else, all the other possible issues that stand between a free trade agreement between India and the US, which has not been signed, which is the reason why you're seeing tariff happening. Of the many things that concerning that, one of them seems to be now India's import of Russian oil. That seems to be the point that Donald Trump is harping on, to the level where he's actually doubled the tariffs, Kartikeya. Bear in mind, Krishna, we always knew it is 25% plus, but I don't think anybody expected 25% plus 25%.
Krishna, the issue is, when he says 25% tariff, what is getting affected? Cement is getting affected, steel is getting affected, apparel is getting affected, agricultural product is getting affected. Which are the industries which are getting affected? Because the Prime Minister said that he will ensure that the MSMEs and the small industry is not affected. So can you just take us through what are the sectors that are going to be affected, and how India will show resilience in fighting this, I would say, completely unpredictable aspect of Donald Trump, Krishna?
Right. It's extremely unpredictable. And Kartikeya, right now it looks like a flat 25% plus 25% tariff on all Indian goods. That's what this essentially means. It hasn't given a category. It hasn't given a particular sector.
Are you saying, Krishna, it's 50%, Krishna? Krishna, are you saying that in some goods the tariff is going to be 50%? Are you saying that?
That is what this looks like, Kartikeya, at this stage. And that's why it's a shocker. It's a massive shocker, because it was meant to be 25% plus a penalty for importing Russian oil. Now that penalty has been quantified as another 25%.
Krishna, you stay with me.
The total tariff is 50%.
Krishna, you stay with me. I'm also joined by Aditya Rajkol. Aditya, is this expected? This 25% tariff plus 25% tariff? Did PMO expect that? Did the government expect that?
Well, that's right. It's a big development coming at this hour. President Donald Trump has announced an additional 25% tariff on India. That means the entire tariff goes up to 50% at this stage. It's certainly a big shocker. India and US have been allies, and, there's a global strategic partnership between India and the United States. And in spite of that, Donald Trump really going that extra way and, in fact, slapping 50% tariff against India. In fact, just about 2 days ago, Donald Trump had announced that he would be actually intensifying substantially the tariffs against India. Clearly, all is not well diplomatically between India and the United States. This also comes on a day when it's amply clear that Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be traveling to China for the SCO summit, thereafter to Japan. But how will diplomatically the Ministry of Commerce as well as the Ministry of External Affairs navigate through this challenge? It really needs to be seen, and how India reacts to this kind of a message that comes in. Of course, NSA Ajit Doval is currently in Russia, and there's dialogue expected with Putin. But clearly, not many options at this stage, apart from a backroom diplomacy that can continue between New Delhi and DC. But at this stage, Donald Trump, in a almost a 4 to 5 page long executive order, has announced an additional 25% tariff, taking the entire tariff to 50% at this stage.
Krishna, please take us through the sectors which are going to be affected one by one. How is the apparel sector going to be affected? How is cement going to be affected? And how is MSME going to be affected? Krishna.
All right. As you're rightly pointing out, the sectors that will be affected, let's take this one by one. Textiles, cut and polished diamonds, tires, metals and auto components. All these sectors will be deeply affected, because a lot of sourcing happens from India, because Indian auto components and Indian textiles and cut and polished diamonds come at a good price. But with these tariffs, that competitive advantage gets taken from India, and that's how these sectors get affected. Indian goods become more expensive to be sourced. If you want to, if anybody wants to source cut and polish diamonds or auto components or textiles, then India as a chosen destination for sourcing them, India loses that advantage because of tariffs, making these products that much more expensive. Let's also then talk about where India's exports, the majority of India's exports to the US come from. Let's look at those sectors: electronics, gems and jewelry, pharmaceuticals, and nuclear reactor and machinery. These alone account for 49%, nearly half of India's exports to the US. All these sectors will also be affected, Kartikeya. That's what it's looking like, because right now, the only thing that I am looking for, I'm waiting for, is that Trump has been threatening huge tariffs on pharmaceuticals per se, as a space per se. We don't know if pharmaceuticals as a sector will be taken off separately and levied even more tariffs by Trump. But for now, pharmaceuticals exported from India to the US will face a 50% tariff, and that is just too hefty. Makes Indian goods that much more expensive and that much, losing in competitive advantage to all the other competitors, and it will have a major impact on all Indian companies operating in these sectors, be it the major number of exports or also, even if they're not major, India has a competitive advantage because of its low cost. So, in summary, to put it together, everything from textiles to gems and jewelry to electronics to heavy machinery to nuclear reactor related and auto components as well, all these sectors will be affected majorly because of these 50% tariffs, because 25%, it's very hard to guess what Donald Trump is going to do. But then 25% plus is what we thought. It's not 25% plus, it's 25% multiplied.
Let's
by
just stay
two,
with me, Karthik Malhotra. My
50%.
colleague also joins me. Just stay with me. Karthik, thank you so much for joining at such a short notice. What does it mean, Karthik, this 50% tariff? Are we looking at 50% tariff, and how does it affect us in context of our export? What are the margins we are looking at, and how does it impact our overall growth? Karthik.
No, it's definitely bad news, Karthikeya. There's no doubt about that. It's 25% plus 25% that makes it 50%. But there's, on the brighter side, it's not 100%. At one point, Donald Trump was talking about imposing 100% penalty on countries importing Russian oil. It's not 100%. He's also gone on to say that tariffs on Russian oil imports and sanctions on Russian oil imports could run as high as 500%. So honestly, this 25% plus 25%, 50% is a problem, is an issue. But how much of this will actually get implemented? How much of this will get negotiated? Is this going to come into effect on 7th August or not US time? Is there going to be another extension to these tariffs? These are unanswered questions right now. And unfortunately, they continue to be unanswered questions when you're looking at a situation as uncertain, as volatile, as we often see with Donald Trump.
We are in the same boat as Brazil. That's the Bolsonaro tax, 50%. Which is the most vulnerable sector right now, Karthik?
So I think in terms of vulnerability, there are multiple sectors. See, which are the sectors which actually have a dent when it comes to exports to the US? We're definitely talking about the pharmaceutical sector. And this pharmaceutical sector, if I understand correctly, is outside of this ambit of 50% tariff, simply because there is another announcement that came from Donald Trump yesterday that the pharma sector is going to face tariffs successively as high as 250%. Then, of course, there is the copper sector and the aluminium and the steel sector. Now, the copper sector, again, has already been slammed with tariffs of 50%. So, honestly, no change there. Then there is the steel and the aluminium sector, which already have a 25% baseline tariff. So is this 50% going to be applicable on the steel and aluminium sector in addition to what the 25% base tariff is? We don't know, because with Trump, every time there are these little, issues which remain unanswered. Then, of course, you have the diamond sector, you have the auto sector, you have tires, you have textiles. The labor-intensive sectors are the ones that India really wanted to promote with the bilateral trade deal with the US, which now seems even more distant than it has ever seemed in the past, even though we are exactly 19 days away from the US delegation likely to visit India on August 25th. So labor-intensive sectors like leather, like textiles, like some auto components, these are sectors which are likely to now become more uncompetitive when it comes to their exports to the US. But if you keep those sectors aside, because the contribution of those sectors also as a proportion of GDP and India's GDP is not that high. The pharma sector is give or take about $10 billion worth of exports to the US. Now, if you keep that sector aside, all other sectors are pretty much in a much lower territory. So I'm saying the dent, if you were to ask me to make a guesstimate, which is something that I could do at the moment, I believe the impact is unlikely to be more than perhaps give or take about 20-25 billion dollars on the outside, because India's overall trade with the US is about 130 billion dollars.
Okay,
India
that's the business part,
$70
Karthik.
billion.
Karthik, that's the business part. I'm not saying that's a small part, but that's a big part. Krishna, my question to you is on the strategic affairs. We understand that the business part is very, very important. It's about jobs, it's about currency, it's about our financial health. But we have had a strategic relationship with the United States of America. There's a tech relationship with the United States of America. After Narasimha Rao, there was a bipartisan consensus between BJP and Congress to continuously improve relationship with the United States of America. Do you think that India's relationship with the United States of America can become a political football, Krishna?
It has already become, Kartikeya, already. You look at the response that India's Minister of External Affairs has given to these continued tariff threats from Trump. India is putting up a very solid defense and telling the entire world that, it was the US that encouraged India to buy oil from Russia when the war began. So it has already become a matter of political contention. The fear here at this stage is that all the good work that has been done in the recent past to take the India-US relations to the next level. Let's face it, the US is India's biggest trading partner at the end of the day. It is the most important strategic relationship for India, for the welfare of its economy and for India's own heft at the global table. So that relationship, which has gone from strength to strength in the recent past, now faces a major crisis because of something like this, because of this particular tariff issue. I mean, 25%. At that point in time, everybody said India needs to take it on the chin and grin and bear with it until a final trade deal is struck between India and the US. 25% take it on the chin. 50%, where will India take it? I will be really interested to know what will be India's response to this. Indian Minister of External Affairs is yet to come out with a statement, but it will be very important because India, on one hand, cannot afford these tariffs, cannot afford to take it lying down. On the other hand, it also has the responsibility to ensure that all the good work that has been done in terms of Indo-US relations do not get decimated on this one particular issue. In the larger context of things, it might be one issue, but it's a crucial issue considering the way the global economy is and the stakes are so high, both for the US and for India. So economics has now the potential to threaten the quality of politics and diplomacy that's gone on.
Krishna, you stay with me. My colleague Aditya Raj joined me from Israel. Aditya, there's another aspect, where I want you. Prime Minister Modi had invested heavily in Donald Trump. 2019 Motera rally, Prime Minister had ensured that when he came back, he was there in White House. That investment was made. Trump has not respected that. What is going to be our response?
That's right, Kartikeya. We've had, bonhomie between Trump and Modi that has been spoken about in detail. In fact, they've shared stage in India as well as in the United States. Of course, the entire relationship, the bandwidth of the relationship has gone from strength to strength, not just in the areas of economy, trade, but, many of the Indian students studying there. Apart from that, business linkages that we have. So it's a huge challenge for the diplomacy and I would say the economic diplomacy of India and the United States at this stage. Trump certainly not looking the other way and in fact slapping 25% additional substantial tariff on India is a massive, massive challenge. Certainly the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of External Affairs would be coming out with a statement. They would be studying the implications of this in greater detail. But this is certainly posing a massive challenge and in several sectors all across India, this will have massive, massive implications. So I'm sure that the diplomats in, South Bloc would be studying this in greater detail and come out with a statement later tonight. But as I said, this is something that was unexpected lines with the way things have gone over the last few weeks. But certainly a shocker when we see the entire bandwidth of the relationship between India and the United States. A lot of agreements that have been signed in the last few years. And of course, Modi and Trump had met recently, immediately after Trump actually took over as president for the second time. So, of course, it's a massive challenge, and we'll have to wait and watch how things really unfold. And as I said, from pharmaceutical sectors to agriculture and to the farmers of India, this would have direct implications. India had, in fact, said in the previous statement that our national interest is of vital importance.
Aditya, before I let go of you, I know you're traveling. Before I let go of you, Prime Minister is expected to be in China on the 31st of August. That's an important development that is taking place, and Ajit Doval is in Moscow. How should I read it?
Well, you could see that there could be some dialogue on this aspect as well. There are important, visits that are going to take place. Prime Minister Modi visiting China on the 31st at the SCO summit, and of course, Putin and Ajit Doval would be meeting perhaps tomorrow. The big talking point is also that Trump has been attacking India on buying Russian oil. But if you see the statements of the diplomats of the United States over the last few years, they've shown immense understanding. They've shown immense maturity to understand how India has taken this national position. But certainly a complete U-turn taken by Trump is posing a massive challenge for Modi's diplomacy and for the Ministry of External Affairs, and particularly Jaishankar and Piyush Goyal. So perhaps a statement likely in the next few hours, but perhaps a bigger challenge lies ahead in the weeks ahead.
And my last question to you, Karthik, before I hand over the baton. I will be handing over the baton to my colleague Kabir. This is a rolling coverage we are doing, This is the rolling coverage we are doing. The baton would be handed live. So my question to you is that there is a tech relationship, there's a business relationship, there's a strategic affair relationship, but there is also business cum security relationship. The West Asia corridor, the Middle East corridor, which is security plus business. There is 2x2 engagement which happens. What is going to happen? This cavalier nature of Donald Trump, doesn't he understand that everything is going to go haywire? The Quad here, the 2x2 there, and the entire idea which Netanyahu was talking about, that Middle East economic corridor?
Right, Karthik, honestly, no simple answers there. These are all valid concerns. And I think, it's important at this point to distinguish between Donald Trump and between the United States of America. Donald Trump perhaps is not at this moment reflecting the overall ideology of the USA. India and USA have a much larger role to play coming from the past, going into the future. I think India-USA relationships have been fairly rock solid. Now, Donald Trump comes in as one element which disturbs this equilibrium which has been enjoyed by India and US over the last many decades. Now, how does this place India? Well, Donald Trump definitely has a problem with the BRICS bloc. So now this Russian oil imports, which becomes a big question mark, is not just a question mark for India. It's also a question mark for China. It's also a question mark for Brazil. So it is playing out right now for, or rather against, India and Brazil. It's not yet playing out against China because God knows Donald Trump perhaps wants to quickly get a deal with China because that seems to be and happens to be the most central nodal point in the entire global supply chain. So Donald Trump is also heading with a degree of caution with its attacks on China. However, with India and Brazil, he's taking a little bigger of a gamble trying to squeeze out a trade deal. Now, valid concerns you raised. There's a Quad versus a BRICS playing out right now. What is India's option if India has to choose one? Can India choose one? Can Donald Trump insist that India chooses Quad or I2U2 over its association with BRICS? And within BRICS, India has its own challenges. India and China sit in the same bloc and are looking at the same policy ecostructure and are looking at pretty much, the same issues, not really being the best of friends. Let's put it that way. So there is a Russia angle, there is a China angle, there's a Brazil angle, along with an India angle when it comes to BRICS. But there's this entire I2U2, there is this entire Quad membership in which US is a central partner. So can India strategically, diplomatically choose an either or scenario? I think the simple answer to that is no. We will have to work with the United States, and Donald Trump, to my mind, and he has used this term in the context of India and India's negotiations, I think Donald Trump right now is an irritant for India, and that irritant will have to be dealt with either by using economic muscle or by using diplomacy, and India is flexing its diplomacy fairly well. India hasn't yet arrived perhaps at a stage to flex its economic muscle as much. So there are certain areas like pharmaceuticals where US depends on India. Can India say, sorry, Mr. Donald Trump, we are not going ahead and we are not paying you tariffs on pharma, import from anywhere else you like to? That becomes a cost
Absolutely,
imperative, and
Karthik,
that
very
becomes a
important point.
cost prohibition.
Absolutely, absolutely. But when we talk about the business relationship, we have to account. Krishna, are you still there with me? Krishna, are you still there?
Yes,
When we talk
please go
about
ahead.
it's about there is a deep people-to-people engagement between the United States of America and India. It's not only about Donald Trump. His presidency will end in 3.5 years. People go to educational universities. There is already deep engagement which India enjoys with the people of the United States of America. Do you think that comes into effect? Because ultimately the politicians can come and go. The countries stay, the people and their interests are durable. Krishna.
Absolutely. People-to-people connection is one of the most important connections that India and the US have. Right now, at this stage, purely what is happening here is a matter of trade wars that is playing out, that has the potential to affect the larger strategic relationship between India and the US. As far as people-to-people relationship is concerned, that is another conversation that has been taken up. Everything from the visa regime to other issues to Trump's own tirade of asking every single company from the smallest to the biggest, including Apple, to keep hiring Americans and stop hiring Indians even. So there are other issues on the table to be tackled with Mr. Donald Trump, with the United States of America. But before we could get to that looks like tariffs have now become a much bigger, more immediate threat and a crisis that India has to deal with. Karthikeya, from where I sit, that's what I think. Yes, there are other issues to be ironed out, including people-to-people connect, which can be improved dramatically, considering how long Indians have been there in the US and been contributing to the United States of America's politics and economics and society at the same time. So a lot needs to be done, and a lot needs to be done for those still workers from India who go to the US to work for companies. What can be done for them? So enough and more people-to-people connect related issues need to be tackled with. But it looks like all of that is being pushed behind by this entire tariff tirade, this tariff threat cycle that Donald Trump seems to be having with India. First, to start with, we'll need to deal with that. How we are going to deal with that will be the first top priority.
If you ask me, Krishna,
only then we can think about the other issues on the table.
If you ask me, Krishna, this is not about trade. This is neo-imperialism of the United States of America. This is not about trade. This is neo-imperialism. This is not about tariff. This is about punishing countries. This is about punishing countries who want to do better in the world. For example, when they put tariffs and sanctions on Iran, our Chabahar project suffered in 2018. So Gwadar was built, and the Chabahar, which was a $900 million project, was being built by Indians as an alternative to Chinese-built Gwadar. We couldn't take that. So that is the problem. The United States of America has turned into a sanction state. From 1949, they have done 656 unilateral sanctions, hurting most of the countries. And the Trump in his own presidency has taken it even further. Your comments on it, Krishna?
Well, absolutely. Trump has brought back the specter of America primarily being a sanctions regime. Right now, all that we're talking about the US is what is the level of tariffs that can be levied, and you're talking about, and it's not the first time that the US has done, but no, it has its phases. There was a Ronald Reagan phase in the US, and it looks like, many attributes of that Ronald Reagan phase is back with the Donald Trump phase, albeit split in between by a Biden presidency. So the United States of America right now, led by Donald Trump, is clearly positioning itself as a sanctions regime, as you're rightly calling it, because the sanctions are not limited to India. The sanctions are not limited to any particular region in the world. It's across the board, and that is the reason why many, experts and analysts believe that if India's competitive advantage gets tapered off because of these rising tariffs, it's not just India. Everybody's competitive advantage is being taken away by Donald Trump with the tariff regime, and in that sense, this is a bullying tariff regime. You're literally bullying countries and bullying economies into dragging them into the negotiating table to agree on terms that are suitable to you. And clearly, India is not playing ball. Otherwise, we would have had a free trade agreement by now with the US. We have a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. But we don't have one with the United States of America because the negotiations have not progressed. The negotiations have been stalled. And probably the only explanation to that is that the US wants everything its own way. And that is the kind of state that uses sanctions, that uses trade, that uses tariffs as a weapon to show might and to show who calls the shots over here. Clearly, the same thing when Donald Trump tried doing it with China, China would have none of it. You saw those days when both of them went at each other when tariffs peaked beyond 150% at one stage. That was what was happening, and then eventually things calmed down. The only hope here is that, there is more sanity that is achieved, in terms of this rising tariff wars between India and the US. But to be honest, Kartikeya, even if the US is a sanctions regime, you've seen what China can do to the US. And China had the capability to call America's bluff when Trump was going at it, raising tariffs beyond 100%, and China raised it even before, even more than that as well. The question now is that what can India do? Because Trump most likely will go after a Brazil after this. In fact, he's been talking about how BRICS nations are at fault for wanting to go for de-dollarization, and he's been, raving and ranting about that as well. So after India, it could be Brazil, which could face the wrath of sanctions of Trump. Trump is already asking for, all charges against Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, to be dropped. So he is likely to use that as a bargaining chip, use tariffs as a weapon to get his way, to get his will, implemented in Brazil as well, in the relationship with Brazil as well. So clearly, you've seen the US do it with all major global powers. It's even doing that with Russia. You've seen Trump's relationship with Putin go from the best to what it is right now. It's as if, he's actually attacking everybody who's trying to do business with Putin. So in that sense, Trump 2.0 is in fact very different from the first presidency of Donald Trump. This time around, as you rightly said, you began this conversation by, clearly this is a sanctions regime, and it'll be interesting to see how global powers react, because the last time the US was a sanctions regime in the world, the state of play between global powers is very different than to what it is right now.
Krishna, many thanks. Do stay on with us. Bullying tariffs coming from the United States here. Kartik Malhotra, executive editor, R. Sridharan, editor international and group editor, business and economy, also with us on the broadcast. We're getting some political reactions here. Let's listen in to those, and then discussion right on the other side as well.
I don't think that's particularly good news for us, but obviously if that takes our total tariffs to 50%, then that's going to make our goods unaffordable to a lot of people in America. And in particularly when you're looking at these percentages, you have to compare them with the tariffs being levied on some of our competitors. And I'm afraid if you look at people like Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, even Bangladesh and Pakistan have lower tariffs than us, then ultimately people will not be buying goods from us in America if they can buy them cheaper elsewhere. So that's not very good for our exports to America. This means we need to very seriously diversify to other countries and other markets which may be interested in what we have to offer. We now have an FTA with the UK. We are talking to the EU. There are many countries in which hopefully we would be able to, but in the short term it is definitely a blow. I don't think we can sugarcoat it.
All right. Sri, let me come to you next. India's energy needs are non-negotiable. We've made it quite clear time and again. 88% of our oil is imported, and Russia offers it at the best rates. And that's not geopolitics. That's survival for us at this point in time. But look at the double standards. If economic independence is strategic to the United States, just like Donald Trump has said in this new executive order, why is it a moral failing when India asserts the same right? We're trying to do the best for our own countrymen. What seems to be the problem here?
Well, Kabir, I think it's fairly simple. Mr. Trump, President Trump, is going around imposing tariffs based largely on his whim and what he feels like, because he thinks he's in a position to do it. And, we were discussing China earlier, and why has he not been able to ram all these tariffs through to China? Because China is a very large economy and very, very significant for US. If China were to stop supplying a lot of the goods that it does to US today, I think US would be very badly hit. So I think he's taking advantage of the relative strengths and weaknesses of the respective economies So from our point of view, Kabir, as you said, buying oil from the best possible source to protect our own national interests so that people in this country, the consumers, are protected. They don't have to pay inflated prices for oil. It's going to be a very important issue for the government. But I don't see this now getting solved through trade negotiations because clearly President Trump has escalated. He's up the ante, so to say. And I guess the best hope for countries like India and others who've been impacted by these so-called reciprocal tariffs, which are to many people who are, looking at it very arbitrary. I think the best hope would be that the cases which are there in the U.S. courts, which have challenged the president's power to impose such tariffs, which is done under something called the IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, that hopefully the courts will see the point of view and say that this is not a national emergency that the US is facing right now, and President Trump has possibly acted beyond his powers than what the Constitution vests in his office. So if the Supreme Court knocks it down, then I think the other route which is available to President Trump would be to go to the Congress to push through a higher tariff. And that would be the right platform because the Congress has the ultimate power to decide on trade policies. It's not so much with the president per se. So if the Congress in its collective wisdom, which includes Democrats and Republicans, decide that these are indeed tariffs that the US should have, then I think the world will reset in a very big fashion. I think Mr. Tharoor was mentioning that India will need to look at other sources to develop as markets. I think that will be expedited. And I think, but it's not going to be just India that hurts very clearly. When you take away a certain supplier from the marketplace, the others then feel that much more comfortable to keep their prices up. So you're reducing competition for the American consumer. You're increasing costs and you're also reducing competition for American consumer. It doesn't matter that, India has gone out of the market today from America, theoretically speaking. But the bigger issue would be the American consumer now doesn't have the choice. He doesn't have competition. So a supplier, let's say from Bangladesh or Vietnam, can demand a relatively higher price than what they would have. So what President Trump is also denying the American consumer is the benefit of global competition. The competition to supply to American consumers at the best possible price. So that is something which will eventually sink in. I think we are already beginning to see that inflation is going up, jobless numbers are going up. So this transmission, which was on hold because the tariffs themselves are on hold, but once these rates are implemented, we will see a quick rise in consumer prices in America. And that's when it becomes a real political issue for President Trump. That's when the pressures on the courts will also mount. Congress will then take a greater cognizance of it. And that's when I think some sort of resolution of this whole issue will happen, Kapil.
All right, we'll have to wait and find out whether that really happens, Sri, but an interesting, important point that you've raised over there. Let me just quickly introduce our additions as well here. I can see Ambassador Suresh Goyal with us on the broadcast. Very warm welcome to you, Ambassador. Krishna Kumar and my colleague Karthik continue to be with us. Aditya Rajkal also with us on the broadcast. Karthik, we were earlier talking about China being key to that particular puzzle. We do need to talk about that as well. What are these other markets that Tharoor is talking about that we need to diversify? What could be some potential options? Maybe Ambassador can come on that as well. But Aditya, let me come to you quickly. Average US tariffs on EU goods 1.47%. Average EU tariffs on US goods 1.35%. The highest tariff since 1935, 50% tariffs. How seismic a shift does that now mean on the global stage?
Well, Kabir, we are looking at a shocker of executive order that has come in from Donald Trump. If we go through the events that have taken place over the last few weeks, this was quite expected. But if we see the bandwidth of the relations between India and United States, between New Delhi and Washington, D.C. over the last many, many years, the global strategic partnership, apart from that, the 2+2 dialogue, and several other dialogues and collaborations between the two countries, this is certainly unfortunate. You would remember that India, in its last statement, had highlighted how this was unjustified and unreasonable in every way. India was only, getting the Russian oil because it was in national interest of India. Just like United States has taken its own national interest in doing trade with Russia when it comes to different sectors, just like the European Union as well. Now look at the statistics. 50% of the LNG that's coming in, or the piped gas that is coming in from Russia, is for the European Union. And there is no statement whatsoever, no justification whatsoever that is coming from the European Union. And that's what Dr. S. Shankar, India's External Affairs Minister, had been exposing over the last 3 years, ever since the war really began, that we condemn aggression, certainly. We are there for dialogue and diplomacy. But don't expect us to join one axis against the other, because we want to remain neutral in such a way where our own priority is our own national interest. Now, what I have been told is that Indian government, both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Commerce, are studying the implications of this new executive order that's coming in. Of course, this was quite expected, as I said. They knew that Trump had made it amply clear that substantially he would be raising these tariffs. But what is the way forward? Just like Sridharan mentioned, it's unlikely that the trade dialogue that's happening between India and US is going to resolve this. So will this be taken to the highest level of the political leadership between India and US? Let's also remember that Prime Minister Modi later this month will be visiting China for the SCO summit. And apart from that, there will be a visit to Japan. And currently, NSA, India's NSA, Ajit Doval, is in Russia. He is expected to meet Putin in the next few hours. So hectic diplomacy at play when it comes to New Delhi. But when it comes to the tariffs, really, what is the way forward? Not much, I would say, but a backroom dialogue at the highest level is something that could resolve this. It does seem that Trump has made up its mind. He is certainly go and walk that path when it comes to India. This reminds me of the bonhomie between Modi and Trump also, that has been a point of discussion all these years through the first term of Trump to the second term. And this time, unfortunately, we are witnessing yet again a very hard diplomacy at play from Donald Trump, and very unlikely that this will be resolved very soon.
The greatest deal maker, at least that's what the pamphlet and the poster read on Truth Social. He tries to put out those posters himself before making these announcements. Ambassador Goel with us also on the broadcast. Ambassador, what do you make of this latest executive order? How aggressive do you think this really is? And this new, parlays that are taking place when you look at the BRICS nations, just like Aditya pointed out, Ajit Doval in Russia, Prime Minister going to be visiting China. Lula da Silva has called out Donald Trump's hypocrisy as well. So the BRICS nations also coming into a huddle. What's really happening? And how do you see this is going to play out?
It's a bit complex, really, as I can make it out. And frankly speaking, even though we had not expected the whole tariff war to go to this extent, but there was always a risk that President Trump would do that, because I don't see that it's really about trade and tariff anymore, really. Tariff has become an instrument for geopolitical gains, and Trump has been using it now really as far as India is concerned. But I think it's just a hunch and my instinct from what I see happening here, it cannot simply be trade. If it was simply trade, 25% was already hurting India. It would have been enough, and Trump had already announced it. But when he goes up to 50% on the excuse of Russian oil, even earlier the Russian oil was there. It was not. There has been no change. So my expectation now really is that Trump is not going to relent on the 50%, number one. Number two, it is not economics anymore, it is not trade, it is more geopolitical. I also noticed that during the Operation Sindoor time, the bonhomie between USA and Pakistan had begun to grow rapidly. And today, in fact, the relationship between US and Pakistan is growing in a manner that we are totally unexpected, really. And it has become, again, basically, as far as the US is concerned, who do you like as a partner, Pakistan or India? And what we see happening is quite clear. Whatever the reasons are, I'm not going to speculate, but that is what I see happening here. Now, given the geopolitics of the situation, I think we need to look at our options. Now, I do remember that India has been through sanctions in the past on several occasions. India didn't cow down. India weathered the sanctions and eventually came out of it. And I'm sure that even now, India will come out of it, because the economics, the direction of economics, the compulsions of economics and trade will dictate to the USA that they will have to partner with India. Whether they do it now, after a few months, after a year, whenever, but ultimately they will have to, because the costs do matter. As far as the markets are concerned, I think we can find the markets. It's not a problem. We have a good team. All I would like to say really here is that from our side, we need to reduce the level of noise. You see, all said and done, USA is an important market. And whether it is Trump or whoever it is, we need to keep the future in mind. And we need to keep our goals in mind. Reduce the noise, look at the options, work for the options, and basically make sure that we do not yield to these kind of tactics from Trump when he thinks that geopolitics can dictate to us as to what he wants. And we are not going to go, we are not going to give in. That is very clear. But we don't have to say it. We don't have to be loud about it. I think everybody will know when they know that we are determined. And the minister is determined. So let us leave it there.
That could be a strategic move that India could pull, because we've already shown that mirror to the United States is double standards, but maybe not raising the right kind of noise. Karthik, come in here. Executive order or executive overreach? I mean, is this the great American dream, punishing Indian consumers to promote American values? When Shashi Tharoor was talking about diversifying our market options, what are some possible options that India can now look at? The Philippines president was in India just yesterday. Prime Minister Modi, the Maldives reset has taken place, have a growing heft in West Asia. Could these be probable markets as well? And the ambassador also says that we will be able to ride through this tariff trouble. What do you have to say on that front?
Right, Kabir, honestly, no easy answers. Even if you look at the India-UK FTA, it's going to take a decade until every little clause and every little FTA benefit accrues to either side. So there are no easy answers to that. See, India is already talking to EU. We are hoping that by end of this year, we will have an India-EU FTA going. We already have a deal with the Switzerland and that entire region of 4 countries, the EFTA. But again, it's a 15-year deal by when investments will start coming in and markets become completely open. So honestly, there's no overnight solution to finding new markets. It's not that you have folks who are carrying goods in their hands and going and trading, with the next available customer. That's not really the case here. So any strategy that India wants to take on expanding its user base or customer base when it comes to the products that India exports is going to be a long haul. It's not going to be an easy answer or an easy win for India, because, let's face it, you also have China in the equation, you have Vietnam in the equation, you have Philippines in the equation. These are all countries which are manufacturing in great numbers. India, of course, has certain specializations which those countries don't. We have our own distinct competitive advantages which we can exploit. But I think let's take a few steps back and really try and analyze what has Donald Trump really been up to. If you remember back around February, March, when the word tariff sort of, became a more regularly used term and a more regularly used word in our vocabulary, the fight really seemed to be between United States and Canada on one side and Mexico on one side. And everybody thought the issue is around fentanyl and the issue is around illegal immigration. And Trump went all guns blazing on these two neighbors, both Mexico as well as Canada. And then the first tariff rates come and hit Canada, hit Mexico 25%. These are big numbers. Everybody is talking about them. They're making headlines. Cut to what happens subsequently. China becomes enemy number 1. Donald Trump wants to go after China. Donald Trump wants to create a lot of noise, wants to raise tariffs, and then that reciprocal tariff, retaliatory tariff, double retaliatory, triple retaliatory, that went on to a point that tariffs at one point were looking at some 300%, obnoxious numbers. Did they ever get implemented? No, they did not. And then, there was Japan and there was South Korea in between. Strong language used by Donald Trump. They're bad trading partners. They don't want to come to the table. We buy so much from them. They don't buy anything from us. What happened eventually? The rate came down from whatever it was, 25% or something. They quickly stitched up a deal. It came down to 15%. So I don't think right now we need to read too much into what Donald Trump is trying to do. Donald Trump wants to penalize India. That is one school of thought. Donald Trump wants to penalize Russia. That's another school of thought. Donald Trump wants Russian economy to be under pressure so that Russia bows down to Washington's pressure and says that, maybe we will throttle back on our war on Ukraine. So putting sanctions or putting tariffs on India because India imports Russian oil, the end goal is that US wants, and Donald Trump particularly wants Russia to be kept out of the equation when it comes to it receiving money. So, it's really not an easy solution. I think India has been maintaining a fairly decent diplomatic stand. It has put a little bit of pressure back on the US. It has said that we are going to protect our own national interest, our own economic interest, and that is something that Ambassador was also just talking about. Is something that we should continue exhibiting. We need not be very vocal about it. Now, coming particularly to sectors which are high value exports to the US, honestly, a lot of those sectors have their own standalone tariffs. Copper, for example, has a 50% tariff. Steel and aluminium have a 25% tariff. Pharmaceuticals will be slapped with tariffs sequentially going as high as potentially 250%. And that number also emerging out of thin air. So right now, if you just look at perhaps barring diamonds, which is one high value export to the US, what is India really talking about? We're talking about textiles, we're talking about leather, we're talking about artifacts. Honestly, not big contributors to India's own economy. Just look at the numbers. India's total trade with the United States is give or take about $130 billion. How much does India export? India exports about $70 billion. $70 billion as a percentage of a $4 trillion economy, which is India, is actually what? It's 1 by 125 or something. It's a small number. You're talking about maybe a 0.5, 0.6% of the overall GDP of India. I'm saying with this 50% tariff, even if that entire trade comes to a grinding halt, what does India have to lose? India will lose possibly 0.4, 0.5%, 0.6% of its GDP. I think that's a gamble India should be willing to take, because at the end of the day, US wants India as much as India wants the US market. And Donald Trump should get that message loud and clear, perhaps not by using strict language and really putting up a very tough stance publicly, but by privately saying, okay, you want to slap us with 50% tariffs, we'll take our time, we'll build our market, we will send our products elsewhere. But when inflation hits the United States, which it will sooner or later, I think Trump will realize that maybe this entire tariff nonsense is not going anywhere.
That's again another interesting point that you've raised. R. Sridharan, let me come to you. Do you think we have the wherewithal to ride this through, just like Karthik was telling us? That's a gamble that we should take. Now, of course, we can answer back with facts, just like we did last week as well, or not make that voice that Ambassador is talking about, not to be that vocal, to show ourselves as that damsel in distress on the global stage. But will that account for India coming across as a fearful nation? I mean, that's a little, like a sticky wicket that we're going to be on at that point in time. How do you think now India should be posturing itself on the global stage? Because tomorrow morning, headlines are going to be Prime Minister Modi in the center, flanked by Xi Jinping and Putin on either side, with, how the discussions are going on this evening.
So, Kabir, you packed a lot into the question. So, let's pass it, very slowly and in a nuanced fashion. I agree with Karthik that at an aggregate level, $84 billion of exports, manufactured good exports to the US actually doesn't look a whole lot. But let us not forget that it's not a small amount either. And for the companies that export those goods, for example, the diamond and jewelry, the electronics, or apparel, whoever, for them, it means the world to them, right? Because a lot of companies possibly have their 60-70% of the market, which is like dependent on the US. So I think it will matter to those companies. It will matter to the people who work in those companies. So I don't think we want to wish a scenario where we want to walk away from a US, a market. I don't think that's a desirable situation or an outcome for India at all. So I don't think we should wish upon that. Now, you asked, how easy will it be for us to develop other markets? I think that's exactly what the exporters are now going to try and do. Let's say the number 2 or number 3 markets, they're going to see how can I push more to these markets? How can I sweeten my deals to these countries? That is the other thing they'll try to do. But again, we'll be constrained by the fact that every market has its own limited consumption. US is the largest market just about for everything in this world, whether it is pharmaceuticals, whether it is like manufactured, goods of like apparel, whatever, footwear. US is the largest market, unfortunately, for most of the manufactured goods in the world. So it's not going to be easy, but it's something which our exporters will try and do. The other question which you asked about, how should we deal with it? I think we should see this crisis also as an opportunity. In fact, I wrote about it on our website, News9 website, Kabir, saying that this is something we should see as a never waste a good crisis, is what I said. So I think the focus for the government and the manufacturers should also be to see how does Indian economy become more productive? How do manufacturers take the waste that they currently have in the system? How do we reduce the cost, the friction of doing business in this country? Can we give our manufacturers better infrastructure, better roads, more reliable electricity, a better ease of doing business? So I think at an aggregate, if this serves as a wake-up call for our manufacturers, for our countries, for our state governments, I think this would have actually helped us in the long run, and it would have made the Indian economy far more productive. And finally, to the ambassador's point that we should not, raise and be vocal about this. Absolutely, I think diplomacy is about doing things very smartly, and he's a diplomat, so I'm not going to argue with his reasoning on that. I completely agree. But at the same time, I think India needs to be very firm. It needs to draw a line where it is willing to compromise, and there are certain areas where it's a sovereign choice that we're making as a nation to protect the interests of our people, whether it's agriculture or whether it's buying oil from Russia. I think we have to state it very firmly that these are some non-negotiables from our perspective, but we are open to discussing and resolving other issues that you may have as a nation. So that's the message I think we should go out to the United States.
Absolutely. If sovereignty really matters, why penalize us when we're trying to exercise our own sovereignty? That's a big question. Ambassador Goyal, right on the other side, but before that, some reactions coming across from former diplomats and politicians alike. Listen in.
यह एक टेक्निकल विषय है और जो संबंधित हमारे सरकार के कॉमर्स मिनिस्ट्री के लोग, विदेश मंत्रालय के लोग इस विषय को लेकर जो कुछ करना है वो कर रहे हैं। ट्रंप का यह जो टैरिफ लगाने का केवल भारत पर नहीं, अनेक देशों पर टैरिफ बढ़ाने का जो कदम है, इससे एक बात तो साबित होता है कि इस समय अमेरिकी अर्थव्यवस्था एक इनसिक्योरिटी के फीलिंग में है। तो उस इनसिक्योरिटी के फीलिंग के चलते ट्रंप जिस प्रकार के कदम उठा रहे हैं, उसके कारण दुनिया में कुछ उथल पुथल होना स्वाभाविक है। उसको मैच्योरिटी से हैंडल करना पड़ेगा। वही हमारा अर्थव्यवस्था, अमेरिकी अर्थव्यवस्था और दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था के हित में है। इसलिए इसको विशेषज्ञों को छोड़े, सरकार को छोड़े, सरकार सही कदम उठाएगी। हर व्यक्ति उस पर अपना टिप्पणी देने की जरूरत नहीं है।
ट्रंप तो बोलते जा रहे हैं, लेकिन हमारी सरकार से जो केंद्र सरकार है उसमें से कोई मंत्री क्यों नहीं कोई जवाब दे रहा है? प्रधानमंत्री को छोड़िए, मंत्री भी नहीं जवाब देने के लिए कोई हिम्मत दिखा रहे। ये कौन सी बात हुई? तो कुछ न कुछ हमारे देश ने जवाब तो देना जरूरी है। क्यों सब मंत्री चुप है? कि ट्रेड डील अभी भी है जारी कि बंद हुई है? इस पे भी बात करें।
I think he is continuing on this irrational path, and this is driven by a certain kind of a personal antagonism, more than any reasonable negotiation, discussion or policy. They can do very little to Russia. They have not much leverage over them because they don't have much trade. So they've been trying to put the countries that are doing trade with Russia in a much higher bracket of tariffs. But at the same time, why I say it's irrational? It's irrational because the negotiations that were almost completed on 6th of July.
You see, all my panelists do stay on with us. We're going to need to have to slip into a quick commercial breather here. But I was going through this, comical survey that various late-night shows in the United States are now doing. And they're checking up on each of those Truth Social posts to calculate exactly how much sleep is the United States president now getting with each one of those braggadocio and irrational statements. A quick commercial breather here. On the other side, lots more to discuss. Do stay on with us.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9.
Associate sponsor, Anchor Toothpaste, नए ज़माने की नई सुरक्षा.
Chandigarh, Coimbatore, NCR and Bangalore, Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Raipur and Hyderabad. We've been here, we've been there. Veka's been just everywhere.
मुझसे नहीं होगा यार।
उनको देख रहे हो? क्या संगीत तक ये स्टेप सीख पाएंगे? ये खूबसूरत चिंता आप करिए। शादी के पर्सनल लोन की चिंता हम संभाल लेंगे। With EMI starting at 94 rupees per day and tenure up to 7 years. Go condoms?
It's over there.
क्या ये डिफरेंट साइजेस में आता है?
Actually, sir, size matter नहीं करता.
तो फिर क्या मैटर करता है?
The hardness
Of the condom.
of what's inside.
For the first time ever, presenting Hard Rock Gel, the hardness gel for men.
अब फ्री हर स्कोर कॉन्डम्स के 10 पैक के साथ.
भाई बहुत असमंजस में हूँ, अपने आप से ही सवाल करके परेशान हूँ। भाई तू ठीक तो है? रिटायरमेंट के बाद लाल स्पोर्ट्स कार लूं या वर्ल्ड टूर?
एक काम कर, तू खाली पुलाव बना, मैं ऑर्डर कर रहा हूँ।
पुलाव नहीं, प्लान। सॉरी, प्लान। लाइफ इंश्योरेंस का रिटायरमेंट प्लान, गारंटीड पेंशन के साथ। अब तेरे भाई के हर सपने होंगे पूरे।
भाई तेरी ये स्पोर्ट्स का 2 सीटर है ना?
अब पुलाव कौन बना रहा है?
ये आवाज में बात मत किया।
ओके सॉरी
भाई कौन बात कर रहा है
भैया।
सपनों को रखो सुरक्षित रिटायरमेंट प्लान के साथ। सबसे पहले लाइफ इंश्योरेंस।
What are you watching, Dad? Don't you often say, think before investing in the stock market? So I'm trying to gain some knowledge. From whom? That's this stocks expert. Makes great educational videos. Gives good investment tips too.
Dad, don't rely on such videos. Do your own research or contact a SEBI registered investment advisor. In the name of education, some influencers often misguide investors. You will have to bear the losses.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. President Donald Trump has just slapped a fresh 25% additional tariff on all Indian imports, specifically targeting India's continued purchase of Russian oil. This means tariffs now stand at a staggering 50%. Let's be clear. This is a move wrapped in moral posturing, but driven by hard economic aggression. Trump's twist, the arm twist, it continues. The same US that continues oil trade with other authoritarian regimes now wants to lecture India on its sovereign energy choices. Quite rich. And where was this concern when American companies kept doing business with China, even after the pandemic, even through trade wars? So many of those questions. With me on the broadcast, of course, Karthik Malhotra, Executive Editor, News 9, R. Sridharan, Editor, International and Group Editor, Business and Economy, and Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal, former Indian diplomat. Ambassador, let me come to you next. During the Biden administration, during the Quad summits that took place, the partnership was elevated to a strategic partnership. Now today, can an ally, that to a strategic partner, dictate who we really buy our energy from, who we don't, and still call this a partnership? Will there soon be a time when we'll have to choose between the Quad and the BRICS?
Absolutely. One or two things. First of all, we are all experts here on the foreign policy, and you have been commenting on that day in and day out. And therefore, when I say something, it will be like preaching to the preacher, but even then I would like to say it. There is no issue of morality here. It's an issue of really what the ground realities are, or the political realities are, what Trump wants, and whether he can achieve that or not is a power game. And the whole diplomacy here is really how to negotiate for your interest in this power matrix that we are faced with. When Biden was the president, clearly, he became member of Quad, China was the biggest threat for him, and everything. So India became part of Indo-Pacific, etc., because India became, even if it didn't announce it, India became a close ally of the USA against China. Now, when Trump became the president, and everybody was saying that Trump's tariff war against China basically will bring India and the USA closer, but please do know, Trump is very transactional. For him, really what matters is what he thinks is right. Whether it's right or not is an entirely different matter. And therefore, today, if he thinks that he has to strike a deal with China, he will do it. There's no question of morality here again. And therefore, I come to the basic issues here, really. I said in the beginning, it's a geopolitical issue. It will be cast in terms of economics, but it is not. He's using economic instruments. So far, no other president has used tariff as a political instrument. Trump is doing it. We have to deal with it. And therefore, I would again strongly suggest 50% tariff, and I think an analysis here done by Karthik showed it clearly. It's not a huge deal. Even earlier, when there was such a high tariff, Vietnam, Indonesia, they were at a disadvantage as far as Indian exports were concerned. So situation has gone back to the same as it was before, rather than giving us an advantage. Therefore, we have to weather through it. We have to accept one thing, that in this whole unipolar world, we were talking about multipolarity, we have to deal with the USA. We depend upon the USA for several things. For in the strategic terms. So we have to deal with the USA. We have to find how best we can deal with it. And if you want to deal with it, rather than, again, I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to say it now. I think one huge mistake we made was that during the Operation Sindoor, we kind of slighted President Trump when he said that he mediated between India and Pakistan. We could have said the same thing in different words without slighting him. When you slight a world leader, how is he going to take it? And therefore, we have done that. It's really so much of water down the Yamuna River or the Ganges or whatever it is. But now we have to deal with it. And I think President Trump's agenda is not economic. It's political, and we have to deal with the political implications of it. But we can do it provided we do not basically seem to be challenging, we do not seem to be arrogant, we do not seem to be that, oh, what can he do to us? We leave it. I mean, he knows the message. But we don't have to speak out aloud that you are nothing. If you tell Trump that you can't do a thing.
Ambassador, I think that quite rightly became a game of tit for tat, because we would have kept ourselves shut had Donald Trump done the same. I mean, he's giving press gaggles on Air Force One. He's speaking on the ramparts of the White House, sometimes on the lawn, and hyphenating India and Pakistan. I mean, on the Libra scales, the passion of patriotism of the entire nation versus slighting a global leader. I think we understand how fairly it went towards one side. But, then again, pertinent point that you've raised over here again. Shri, let me come to you. Of course, touch upon, do you echo along with what the ambassador is saying vis-a-vis Operation Sindoor and how, Donald Trump kept on saying that he was the one who mediated that claim, when over here, time and again, the Ministry of External Affairs, the Prime Minister, they made it quite clear, even in the Parliament, that there were DGMO level talks that actually happened. So, of course, do you echo along with what the ambassador is saying? And, of course, my follow-up to you is looking forward to the future, of course, jumping the gun and speculating here. How does penalizing India and Indian exporters help Ukraine? What if 4 years from now, the greatest deal maker is unable to call for a ceasefire or stop of the Russian onslaught on Ukraine? Will India still have to be blamed then?
So on Operation Sindoor, Kabir, I think what India did was he put out a factual statement saying that, yes, it was a call from the Pakistani army to our command control, which led to the ceasefire from our end. Otherwise, as we know, there was a lot of damage that was done to Pakistan's air infrastructure, and the damage would have continued thanks to BrahMos. So I don't think there was anything wrong in India clarifying it. Could we have done it more diplomatically? If yes, why? I think these are all open to debate. But I think there is merit in India dealing with issues in silos. So let me explain what I mean. Let's say the tariff issue right now with US. We don't have to necessarily see US as our enemy, right? There is a certain trade issue that needs to be resolved with US. We should work on that. It doesn't mean that we throw the baby with the bathwater. I don't think that's good diplomacy. That's good geopolitics. Similarly, when it comes to China, yes, we have our border issues with China. But I think again we should silo and cooperate with China on many economic fronts, especially when it is beneficial for India as a country, because China is eventually a large supplier of rare minerals. It's a large exporter. It's a heavyweight at the global, at the global table. So I think there is a need for India to silo issues and not confabulate them or like conflagrate these issues into something bigger than what they need to be. I think in moments like this, what it needs is very a sagacious approach to these issues. We need to make our moves very calculatedly, and not get into a situation where things just unravel and they go from bad to worse. The final question you asked about Ukraine, whether penalizing India is going to help Ukraine. Obviously, it is not going to help Ukraine. But I think the intent here is that Russia should stop benefiting. It should not be able to finance its war by selling, oil to countries. Russia should, be deprived of money, so it can't continue the war with Ukraine. Now, why is Russia fighting a war with Ukraine? Is a totally different aspect. Is NATO completely blameless? Obviously not. Was there a NATO provocation, repeated provocation, which has brought Russia to this stage where it feels the need to protect its own interests? And you can't come to Russia's backyard and say that, okay, I'm going to make Ukraine a part of NATO or threaten them. Because let us recall history. There have been instances when Mr. Putin became, the president of Russia, when he took over as the premier of Russia. He did ask for NATO membership. He did ask NATO to allow Russia to become member. But it was NATO which kept laughing it off and said, you're not welcome. So I think the Western countries also need to revisit history and see how much are they responsible for the state of affairs today, and then come to some sort of a conclusion. Because I don't think anyone merits from making things worse, whether it is on the geopolitical front, whether it's on the geo-economic front. Because I think we really don't want situations to go to a point where, let's say, we're staring at a third world war, because I don't think that really helps anyone at all, Kabir. So I think that better sense needs to prevail all around, and cooler heads need to get to the negotiating table and sort these issues out. Ultimately, everyone needs to progress together.
Well, we've got a breaking development, Sri. My apologies for interjecting here. The Ministry of External Affairs has come out with its own statement. It has now hit back hard on the United States. They've made our position clear on the issue, says the Ministry of External Affairs. India will continue to protect its national interests, is what the Ministry of External Affairs says. India hitting back at Donald Trump's latest tariff bomb, 25 plus 25, 50% in all. MEA says actions are unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. All right, there we have it. India has hit out with its own statement. We were talking about whether we had to be this vocal or not. Is this level of, being vocal, is it fine right now, Ambassador? What do you make of India's latest reaction now? Actions unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. Pretty much the same thing we said on the August 1 deadline as well.
I think this is quite a clear statement. It is not really, we are stating our position firmly, very, very clearly, and that's it. So I see no harm in the statement here. In fact, this is just the right kind of a statement, balanced statement that the MEA should have issued. And we should just leave it there now for the time being.
Okay, so you're of the opinion that we should leave it here. We've made our voice heard. We've put out our statement as well. Karthik, how do you read MEA's latest statement? India hitting back at that latest tariff bomb, because it's very interesting what Sri said. Maybe we can continue to work in silos. The foreign ministers meet on the Quad front. Piyush Goyal and delegation meet their counterparts on the business particular front. And the bonhomie between Modi and Donald Trump can continue. Those Howdy Modi events and Namaste Trumps can continue on that particular front. That's a great way to look at. And also, what do you make of MEA's latest statement?
Sorry.
Right. So on to the first question first. I think MEA's statement fairly measured again. Nothing new coming out. I would not really call it India hitting back. I think it's India just reacting, and it's a fairly reasonable reaction, and that's the word that has been used as well. Unreasonable, unjustified. So, and India continuing to protect its national interest. Honestly, nothing new to read. The response is measured, but partly, I think that hint of defiance continues to be there, which I'm happy about, that we are saying that we are not going to bow down to Donald Trump's pressure. We will continue to protect our national interests, whatever it takes. Now, coming to the other point about these diplomatic as well as, the business-to-business ties continuing in silos, well, barring the bonhomie between Donald Trump and Modi, I don't see that as a theme which is likely to play out, at least in the immediate future. But beyond that, yeah, I think, we've got to understand that no matter how hard Donald Trump tries to convince us that the order of the day has changed and it's all about unilateralism, I think at some point there is interdependence, and that interdependence cannot be done away with. So you will have to look at geopolitics and geoeconomics with this understanding of globalization, that you cannot live by yourself. You cannot have enemies. You cannot just exist in a silo without really engaging bilaterally with any other country. So I think that has to be understood fairly clearly, that India will have to continue its talks with China. Of course, there have been skirmishes in the past. We've got to consider at least some part of it as water under the bridge. Keep certain no-go areas, keep certain non-negotiable areas, but continue and bridge those ties at least.
I do have the statement with me as well. The United States has in recent days targeted India's oil imports from Russia. That's how we begin our letter. And you're saying we're not hitting back, we are reacting. Ambassador also making a point that that's all we had to do. We have a commercial commitment at this point in time. To my panelists, do stay on with us, and to the viewers as well. Lots more coming right on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9 English News.
Associate sponsor Anchor Toothpaste, नए जमाने की नई सुरक्षा.
खूबसूरत सी तुम कोई चिंता करो, पीछे भरोसा खड़ा है तुम्हारे, तुम नया कल बनाते रहो.
जब कोई हमारी बाकी चिंताओं को संभाल लेता है तो हम कर पाते हैं खूबसूरत सी कोई चिंता. टाटा कैपिटल में हम आपकी हर फाइनेंशियल चिंता को संभाल लेते हैं ताकि आप करें सिर्फ खूबसूरत चिंताएं.
चंडीगढ़, कोयम्बतूर, NCR and Bangalore, Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Raipur and Hyderabad. We've been here, we've been there. Vekas been just everywhere.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9 English News as it should be.
Well, thanks for staying with us. The breaking development is that India has now reacted to Donald Trump's latest tariff threat. He's imposed another 25% additional tariff, making that total tariff on India a collective 50%. A final round of reactions from my colleagues Kartik Malhotra and R. Sridharan. We've already made it quite clear that we now need to take a look at how we can diversify some other markets, whether this is going to impact the middle class or not. What on that front? Who's really going to end up paying for these additional prices? How much is it going to impact and burn a hole in the middleman's pocket and wallet?
Very simple, Kabir. If US does not have alternative sources, suppliers for the goods that India gives, prices are going to go for the American consumer. It's not the Indian supplier who's going to bear it. They might try to absorb a little bit of it, but certainly not the whole of it. And neither is the American importer going to absorb any of it. Okay. So ultimately, Kabir, what needs to happen is that the realization needs to sink in, is that the reason why the US economy has a trade deficit is for a very simple reason. The US economy does not make or cannot make everything that the American consumer wants at the price at which they want. Will putting additional tariffs on India, China, Brazil, Vietnam, and all the rest of the world, is that going to change that fact that US cannot and will not be able to make everything that the American consumers want? Obviously not. So that reality will sink in. How will the reality sink in? When the prices at the shop shelves start going up, when American incomes start lagging the inflation, that's when the pressure will build on political leadership, including President Trump, to revisit some of these tariffs and scale them back. So I think it's a matter of time before economic sense, and this is basic economics, this is not even rocket science, this is basic economics, before that settles in, and we might see some unwinding of these policies happening, but maybe not in a hurry, but eventually it has to happen.
All right, then. I think we're going to leave it here. Just like the ambassador said, we should just put out that statement and wait and watch, not make too much of a fuss, looking like a damsel in distress. India is continuing to navigate its own multipolar world path, and the message from Washington is clear: comply or pay. But the question is, will economic coercion force alignment or fuel resistance? That's one of the biggest aspects that we need to take a look at. We're going to continue to probe these developments, ears and eyes peeled onto the ground on the economic fallout and impact, how the markets are going to react tomorrow as well. Slipping into a quick commercial breather here. Many thanks for watching, and thank you for your attention to this matter.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
व्यू मस्त है और चाय भी बुरी नहीं है।
नए घर में चाय के मजे कहाँ लोगे? ये खूबसूरत चिंता आप करिए। होम लोन की चिंता हम संभाल लेंगे with attractive interest rates and instant sanction.
Score condoms? It's over there.
क्या ये डिफरेंट साइजेस में आता है?
Actually, sir, size matter नहीं करता.
तो फिर क्या मैटर करता है?
The hardness
Of the condom.
of what's inside.
For the first time ever, presenting Hard Rock Gel, the hardness gel for men.
अब फ्री हर स्कोर कॉन्डम्स के 10 पैक के साथ.
भाई, बहुत असमंजस में हूँ। अपने आप से ही सवाल करके परेशान हूँ। भाई तू ठीक तो है? रिटायरमेंट के बाद लाल स्पोर्ट्स कार लूं या वर्ल्ड टूर?
एक काम कर, तू खाली पुलाव बना, मैं ऑर्डर कर रहा हूँ।
पुलाव नहीं, प्लान। सॉरी, प्लान। लाइफ इंश्योरेंस का रिटायरमेंट प्लान, गारंटीड पेंशन के साथ। अब तेरे भाई के हर सपने होंगे पूरे। भाई, तेरी ये स्पोर्ट्स का 2 सीटर है ना?
अब पुलाव कौन बना रहा है?
ये आवाज में बात मत किया।
ओके सॉरी भाई,
कौन बात कर रहे हैं
भैया?
सपनों को रखो सुरक्षित रिटायरमेंट प्लान के साथ। सबसे पहले लाइफ इंश्योरेंस।
Light, camera, and action. Kick back, relax, grab your favorite snack because News 9 is here with your weekend dose of entertainment. It's time to take a deeper dive into the buzzworthy happenings of the entertainment world. From celebrity gossips to exclusive conversations, from nostalgic moments to News 9's pick of the week. Don't worry, we've got you covered here. And I hope you've grabbed your popcorn by now because News 9's page 3 is here to serve you everything that we call entertainment. So do stay tuned every Saturday and Sunday, 2:30 p.m.
Uttarakhand has been witnessing heavy continuous rainfall this season. Why did this happen? This is happening because of us, humans, and that's the fact. That whether it was an impending climate change, what should state governments be doing, sir? We do not nurture Himalayas. Himalayas will not nurture us. After targeting India on its alleged high tariffs, New Delhi stands firm against Trump's bullying.
1 करोड़ वोटर्स ऐड हुए थे, जो हमें मिला है वो एटम बॉम्ब।
I really expect that our political parties should respect for institutions which are mandated by the Constitution.
What is to the nines? In literal terms, it's perfection. But to us, it's not just a phrase, it's an attitude. One that starts at your desk and sends a statement to the world. To the nines is about taking charge. It's a way of life where every scene, every fold, is crafted with excellence. It's timeless elegance and uncompromising quality made for the corner office. It's the ideas that inspire redefining order and elevating the tabletop. To the nines, for the leaders of today and the visionaries of tomorrow.
Uttarakhand has been witnessing heavy continuous rainfall this season. Why did this happen? This is happening because of us, humans, and that's the fact. That whether it was an impending climate change, what should state governments be doing, sir? If we do not nurture Himalayas will not nurture us. After targeting India on its alleged high tariffs, New Delhi stands firm against Trump's bullying.
1 करोड़ वोटर्स ऐड हुए थे, जो हमें मिला है वो एटम बम।
I really expect that our political parties should respect for institutions which are mandated by the Constitution.
A small window of hope has opened for Nimisha Priya. You know, human beings live by hope. Is Vijay challenging